You're live. Great. Thank you so much. I'll call to order our Environmental Concerns and Real Property Tax Services meeting for today. I want to thank Supervisor McGowan for chairing the committee last meeting when I was absent. Thank you. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of our last meeting? Thank you, Supervisor Smith, Supervisor McGowan on second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, carries. Thank you. We're going to do environmental concerns first. We don't have any action items for today, but we had some public reach out to me about harmful algal blooms. And so I thought it would be great to have a little update before the summer starts. So we're going to switch right into our environmental concerns agenda. And I've asked Mr. Wick here from Lake George Park Commission to give us a little update, help us with some public awareness about HABs and what the Park Commission is doing. Dave, I'll pass it to you. I think we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. So Claudia asked if I would step in for a few minutes and just give you a general overview of where we are with harmful algae blooms and around the Lake George area. I believe everybody may be aware, I'll hold this up, I don't know if you can see it. There is a harmful algae bloom action plan for Lake George. That's been out for several years. The original iteration was 2018, and the current one that's updated is 2022. And we have had a few different algae blooms in Lake George. I think most of you folks probably know. However, they've been very limited in scope, which is the good news behind it. So they haven't been harmful yet, and they haven't been really blooms per se, but by the DEC standards, they did meet something that was reportable because there was a sheen on the water. And when advisors were sent up from DEC, they did confirm that there is what's called a Delicospermum outbreak, which is the cyanobacteria that has presented itself in Lake George, and now it's in the range of 7 to 10 times. Nothing in terms of toxicity has shown up yet, which is very good news. Delicospermum as a cyanobacteria can have a toxicity associated with it. The researchers don't know exactly what triggers that toxicity yet. If you wanted a deep dive into this topic, I would put you in touch with Kevin Rose from Darren Freshwater Institute, who's much more knowledgeable on the specifics of the matter than I am. But the long and short of it is we have unfortunately seen our first very small scale harmful algae blooms on Lake George, but they have not come with any level of toxicity. And last summer, we did really not see the level of these kind of small scale blooms that we had seen in 2020 and 2021. So we're not exactly sure why that is, but we do keep an eye on it. And that tends to be one of the questions that comes back to the commission quite often is who is informing the public of these? And I think that's something that Claudia had asked that I try to take a stab at, and there's no great answer for it. DEC is the New York State designated entity responsible for the management when they can, of course, of harmful algae blooms, the reporting about it, the tracking of it. They have no obligation to do much past that. They have put significant resources into developing some harmful algae bloom plans for several lakes in New York State, Lake George being one of them that we worked with them on, several other parties, Soil and Water Conservation. I think I see Jim in the background over there, Lake George Association, regional planning, and those. So there is a plan to try to keep harmful algae blooms from presenting themselves in Lake George. However, it reads very simply like a watershed management plan, which is keep as many nutrients out of the lake as we can, and kind of hope for the best. Right? We can't control the temperature of the lake, and the temperature of Lake George has increased about 3.7 degrees in the last 40 years. That's probably, at least according to the limnologists at Darren Freshwater I've talked to, probably the driving factor behind some of the increased aquatic growth and some of the increased regular filamentous algae we see on the shorelines around Lake George now, but certainly outside influences to Lake George, including stormwater runoff, septic failures, those types of things can induce some additional nutrients that can cause some algae challenges. So That's a quick overview of where we are. In terms of the informing of the public, that's a challenge. And that's what we've talked about in the past, because there is no formal system for informing individual homeowners about harmful algae blooms. And there is no mechanism that is in any way a rapid test to detect whether any small algae bloom that we may have on Lake George has any toxicity associated with it. And so some of the concern is if we go crying wolf every time that we see a little bit of a green sheen in a certain bay on Lake George, and we tell every property owner around there, it's going to be subsequently followed, and rightly so, with, well, is this harmful? Is this going to be problematic for my drinking water supply, or people swimming in the lake, or my dogs to go down there? And without that level of rigorous testing at each individual point, at each individual property, getting those results back, that simply is not possible. There are many, many lakes in New York State that have been dealing with harmful algae blooms much, much longer than we have really here in Warren County. If you go onto the DEC website, just type in harmful algae blooms, they actually have a pretty interesting mapping system that shows they started gauging it and mapping it and tracking it in year 2012. And the number of lakes that have experienced harmful algae blooms has been exponentially growing each year. It started out, I believe, that they had 2 reported, and then 4, then 8, 16. It's really kind of interesting and terrifying at the same time, the amount of lakes that are experiencing harmful algae blooms. And then, of course, in November of 2020, we experienced our first very small scale one. So again, to kind of bring it to a quick close, we have not seen any toxicity from the Dolichospermum increases here in Lake George. And that's a good thing. And we're always open to better ways to better educate and inform the public about what we're seeing out there in Lake George, and to make sure that there is no sense of panic for what we have right now, because there is really no health threat whatsoever here on Lake George from what we've seen. And we certainly hope for that to continue in the future. So that's a quick update and overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions or have a conversation on this at any time.
Thank you, Dave. That was very helpful. I know that was quick, but it's good news that so far none of them have been harmful. It is a little bit troubling that it takes so long to test. And I know you mentioned we can't jump the gun right away if there's a green sheen. Can you tell us what we should be looking for besides that? And if we see something, who do we tell on Lake George, or like Glen Lake is a concern too?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I have the ability to share my screen. I just pulled up a few slides from a presentation I gave in the past that kind of shows you what it would look like on Lake George, or really any other lake. If you wanted to make me a co-host for the meeting, I could probably share some of those slides. But in general, it looks different than anything else that people have normally seen on any of their water bodies. At least the Dolichospermum, when we see it, it's a very kind of neutrally buoyant cyanobacteria that when it rises to the surface, it looks almost like a very thin paint sheen on the surface. So it doesn't look like, we get a lot of false reporting here at the commission about, hey, we think we have a harmful algae bloom in this area. And we respond, of course, to everyone. Let me see. Thank you, Tammy. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. Share 1 second. Okay. All right. So hopefully, can you see a couple of slides here, or at least a slide?
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Okay. So this is really the first that was found in Lake George. This was the November of 2020. Really, Dolichospermum increase. They called it a harmful algae bloom. I'm always a little bit cautious about saying harmful algae bloom, even though traditionally, by their definition, it is one. But if you look here, it's basically just a green sheen that shows up on the surface. They can vary in appearance, but every one that we've seen on Lake George ultimately look like this. If you took a sample of water and stuck it in a bucket, it looks like pollen, like kind of a greenish pollen that you don't exactly know what it is, but as it settles out, we see these things happen on Lake George on very, very calm days where there's not a lot of water circulation and there's no wind action. So they can finally rise to the surface, and that's when you see that ultimate sheen. So these are just a few kind of quick pictures. So most people wouldn't even recognize it. The person on the left over here, that's Kristen Wild. She was with the Lake George Association, and she has the unique title on her name now. She has found most of the harmful algae blooms on Lake George because her parents have a house on Harris Bay, and she knows what to look for. And when she goes down to the water sometimes, she says, hey, this is happening out here. It's reported to DEC. And now the DEC hasn't even come up anymore because they know there's enough trained people up here to kind of confirm this directly. Unless we have something larger that DEC would be more concerned with. We're to the point now where it's simply reported and logged into the system. If you look under a microscope, this is basically what they look like. They're some of the oldest organisms really on the planet. They've been around for millions of years. They've been in Lake George for as long as Lake George has been around, about 15,000 years. It's just the fact of why are they increasing now? And that's a question that the best researchers really in the country and the world are looking at, and we're just the recipients of that information. So this is really what people, if they're going to see something on Lake George as a harmful algae bloom, or really any water body, this is really what it's going to look like, at least if it's Stilicospermum. If there's another one, we simply haven't had that experience yet here in Lake George. So that's a quick summary of what it should look like for folks. And as I said, we're always open to better ways to get the word out, but in a non-alarmist way, because again, there's currently no public health challenge whatsoever or recreational impacts. And Lake George is still one of the cleanest and clearest water bodies in the country.
And we'd like to keep it that way. Thank you for all of your efforts. I know that it was a long road to get the septic inspection regulations passed, and we're now starting to see that hopefully go into effect this summer, I think.
Yeah. It's started already. As a matter of fact, I was going to highlight that. Our first inspection was last Tuesday out on Assembly Point, and that was actually a failure. So that was interesting. I was out there myself with two of our staff, and we know there's going to be quite a few that are these legacy systems that was from 1967 when the house was built. And it was a clear failure, and the homeowners understood as such, and they're going to be moving forward with working with the town of Queensbury to get approvals to update that system. So our 3 new septic inspectors started just yesterday. We're actually in the back room right now doing a training with them. And we have, I believe, 8 inspections set up for next week and about 30 or 40 set up so far. The letter only went out to folks a few weeks ago. The plan is we're going to be looking at, there's 2,700 properties within the commission's inspection program. That's 500 feet from the lake and 100 feet from DEC regulated streams. Equates to 2,700 properties, or about 550 properties each year over the 5-year rotating inspection cycle. So I think most of you folks have been aware of this, if not involved directly in the commission's development of the program. And we know that the first year is going to have a couple of bumps and bruises, but we have some excellent people hired as our inspectors. We're very fortunate to have Dave Hatton, the past director of Queensbury Planning and Codes, as one of our septic inspectors. He created with the town board the Queensbury Septic Program. So we're certainly knowledgeable on everything that we're doing, and he's going to be our lead trainer. So we're looking forward to that. And it's going to be a busy summer.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. I know that there's a lot of work happening on Lake George and also around the county. You mentioned Jim Lieberman is here. He was here for our MS4 program for the last committee meeting, Warren County Soil and Water. Jim, I don't want to put you on the spot today. We'll bring you back another time to talk about what you guys are doing around the county. Really appreciate it. Are there any questions for Dave before we let him go? And Amanda, will you put that chart up? I did get this chart prepared by a citizen in the county. Stuart Allen put it together, showing the number of HABs that have been reported on various lakes over the last few years. And as Dave mentioned, you can see that the total number are increasing over.
Yeah, I haven't seen this. The DEC puts this out.
I think that he put it together using DEC data. It's not technically a DEC chart.
Okay, got it.
Sorry, Supervisor Smith. Yep.
On that, do we know if these are, if the number's increasing because of better reporting or because the actual incidences are increasing?
I think that's a good question. Do you have an answer for that, Dave?
No, I agree. It is a good question. I think people are a little bit more aware of what to look for, but there's only a certain amount of people really kind of focused on this. So I would hazard to say that the first reported bloom was something that was definitely pretty close to the first time that it was actually experienced on Lake George. And so we have our Marine Patrol looking for it, and Darren Freshwater, of course, is out there looking for it on summer days. So I think it's probably a combination that we're going to see more and more of these minor blooms out there because there are trained people looking for it. But I do believe, and that's a concurrence of Darren Freshwater Institute, is because they've been out there every year, all summer, forever. That's what they do. They hadn't seen that before 2020.
Supervisor. Yep. Smith.
Do we know if there's like any academia working on this? Because it sounds like it's algae and spiral, whatever, but that's a lot of science. You know, science to catch up to what we're seeing. And a lot of times that happens at academia more than it does in public places. So do we know if anybody else is working on this besides who's already said?
Well, I know in just kind of anecdotally, there's the Adirondack Lake Assessment Program. They do a lot of water quality testing as well as CSLAP, which is around the state. And then we've got, the Nature Conservancy. Jim's organization is working on some new lake assessment programs. I don't know if I'm missing anything else. There's I don't know though the specific answer to whether any of those organizations or academia are working, specifically on HABs and how we identify them and what we are to do to stop them, other than we heard, it's a result probably of temperature, stormwater runoff and septic.
Yeah. There is a considerable body of expertise that's going into the world of harmful algae blooms. There's a week-long summit every year specifically dedicated to harmful algae blooms. The Jefferson Project on Lake George, which is a combination of IBM and RPI and Lake George Association, has put a significant amount of resources into trying to help identify the causal factors of the Dolichospermum outbreaks that we see here on Lake George. I was actually, as you were chiming in, I was emailing Kevin Rose, who is now the director of Darren Freshwater Institute, to see if we could go grab some lunch. And I wanted to catch up on some of the research. He always wants to catch up on some of our projects. We like to keep a pretty close linkage. So I can always report back to this group at any time to let you know, or Kevin can come on directly. I'm sure he'd be happy to let you know the research that they're doing on Lake George, because he's certainly one of the most knowledgeable people I know on this topic.
Okay, we should do that. Supervisor Smith?
I just wonder about a unity effort. So in research, and this is my other job, we lose a lot of time and money because we're doing redundant things. And this organization, this lab's doing the same thing as this lab. There's a little bit of crossover, so we lose time and money on that. So I just wonder if there's any way to get some kind of unity of effort on that.
Yeah, we can talk about that and see where we might have overlap, or if there already is unity of effort. That's great. I don't know the answer.
Good one.
Supervisor McDevitt, then I'll come to you, McGowan.
Yeah, I kind of tied into the internet this morning on this specific issue, and I basically, Dave, you've kind of isolated it, but we're talking about excessive nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, lots of sunlight, warm temperatures, calm waters, and and as I was kind of pushing the buttons on my iPad, I was saying, do we have any specific corrective solutions to the issue at hand? And I think we'll find at our next committee meeting that there is Ethan will probably maybe bring this up as far as Squirm Lake is concerned, and how where we hope for some funding and approval to fund the Squirm Lake aquatic invasive species. So we're moving forward specifically on Squirm Lake with the issue, and I'm just impressed that we appear to be on top of the situation, and the issue is obviously we're a big country and a national issue. When they talked on one of these items, they talked about the red tide in the state of Florida, and that's how the color of the water gets to a color red when we truly have harmful algae bloom. So not a new problem, but I'm just impressed that we as a county are, Dave, you appear to be on top of it, and we thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Warren County has been a huge partner as long as I've been around, for 30 years, in conservation on all activities supporting soil and water, cooperative extension, certainly the Park Commission for a boat inspection program. So anytime you guys want to sit down and talk about these issues or what we can do to address them, the commission is always ready to do so.
Thank you, Dave. Supervisor McGowan?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dave, for showing up today. This is interesting. The two that I really have a concern on is, like Wilkie Reservoir. It's up on the mountain with no homes around it, really no major roads. So, and then I live right around, I'm sure it's Round Pond right around the corner here. I'm hoping, and not the round, it's Round Lake down there in Clifton Park, but Round Pond, there's very, little development except for, the golf course. Not that I'm blaming that they put a lot of fertilizer down over there, because most of it's across the street and that, but those two bring up a concern that they have, we have algae blooms on those particular lakes that are, really, well, one's not even developed, and then the other one, very, very few houses around Round Pond. So, but stormwater, I could see maybe possibly on Round Pond, but living on there, and now with the salt reduction in the brine they're putting down, that road is because I come right off of Birdsell there, and and I looked at, but those are the two I have concern in the study of where this possibility. I mean, definitely the warmer waters, that's for sure, but I'm just shocked to see them there.
Yeah, I know. I talked to Jim about this maybe last summer. Bob Bombard, that works with Jim, is very well versed. He's a limnologist by trade, and that's a head scratcher, right, Jim? I haven't heard any reasonable explanation for that aside from water temperature, nor have I heard of anybody else. I don't know, Jim, if you have any update on that one.
I was just going to say, I was actually with Bob, because we go out and we do a surface sampling of the city's watershed
Okay.
once a month, and that happened to be found it, reported it. And one thing you got to remember, this was probably in August. We were low on water, so the problem is, and you can talk to Dave about this, you can talk to Beth about this. You have a certain volume of phosphorus and nitrogen, and in particular nitrogen is for cyanobacteria. And when you remove 80% of the water from your sample, you've highly concentrated it. So that warming is exponentially increasing the amount of growth. And back to what Dave said, Bob frequently says this, cyanobacteria is the primordial ooze that made everything. So it's always been there, it always will be there. It's these additional stresses that are getting put onto our waters that we're seeing it. So warming, additional runoff, stuff, anything, because there's natural deposition. So up in the watershed area, yeah, you are having that, because there was when I was the day I was there, I sampled up there once a year. The last 5 years, and the lowest I'd ever seen that reservoir. So that's part of it. So the weather, this heat plays a role. And if we have these rolling dry times, you're going to see that.
Thank you, Jim. I feel better now.
Well, okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. We will let you get back to your day and to training, and we'll keep in touch with you. And Jim, thanks for being here today as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, we're going to switch over to our real property agenda. And without objection, I know there are people from the public here to weigh in on this second one. So I'd like to jump to that one so they can talk to us, and then we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. Go ahead, Lex.
So the item that Claudia is talking about is the action agenda number 2. which is that Governor Hochul support legislation for amending the condominium law for Warren County. This will allow the towns in the county the option to assess all newly constructed condominiums in a manner that reflects the most current market value. I had reached out to Terry Ross, the assessor from the town of Queensbury, and asked her if she could come and just speak to you all about this. There is some other assessors here from Lake George and Fulton Landing, and also a prior assessor who is still a member of our local assessor association, Deanne Ream. So without objection, can we ask Terry to the podium?
Yeah. That way people online can hear you too.
Thank you. I'm Terry Ross, the assessor for the town of Queensbury. And I just want to introduce who's with me today. Chris Hayes is the assessors for the town of Horicon and the town of Bolton. She's also the president of our New York State Assessors Association this year. So she's doing a great job. Lori Barber is the assessor for the town of Lake George. And that person right there is actually my mother, who is Deanne Ream. And she's had 40 years as an assessor, and she retired just a few years ago. This issue started way back when she was an assessor in the 1980s. So we have her here for some historical reference if anybody wants to ask some questions. The condominiums. The state now mandates how assessors have to assess them, and we don't assess them as we do all the rest of real property, which is at market value. They say that we need to assess them as if they were an apartment building with individual units in it, what they would rent for, and then come up with a market value that way, instead of being able to compare the sale prices of those individual condos like we do for other residential property. Think this probably started with, New York City legislators, maybe politicians that didn't want to pay full taxes on their, $1 million condominiums in New York City. So unfortunately, it's a blanket. It's throughout New York State. That's how we're mandated to assess them. We've been fighting, the State Assessors Association has been fighting this, like I said, since the 1980s. Last year, we got the closest that we could get. We've had legislation every year since the 1980s. And last year, we came up with a local option. Instead of mandating how you assess condominium projects, we want the towns, the municipalities, to have a local option, either continue to assess them as you're assessing them, which actually means that they're assessed at about a third to a half of what they would normally be assessed for. That means that they're paying taxes a third less or a half less than anybody else. Now, out in the western part of the state, this is really bad because builders out there build whole neighborhoods, condominium style. They're single family homes, but the ownership is condominium ownership. So because of that ownership, there might be a house here that's under condo ownership. And then there's a house on the street next door, just like it, perfectly, the same type house, the same build, the same everything. That is just like you and I would buy a home. The regular house that's sitting there is going to be assessed at market value. This house is not. So two identical houses. This person that's in condominium ownership is going to pay a third to a half less than what the person next door, which since the 1980s, the assessors have been trying to fight this to say, this is just not fair. It is just not fair. Up until we came up with this local option, it was voted down every year. Never passed anything in the legislature. Last year, the Assembly passed it. The Senate passed it. It went to the governor's desk. Like the December 31st, the last day she could, I think, she voted it, vetoed it. And the reason the veto memo was that she considers it affordable housing. Okay, don't think so.
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
She considers condominiums affordable housing.
So sort of funny.
Okay,
You know,
that's what I
that's-
thought you said. I was a tad bit shocked. You can't make this up.
No, I don't make this
Jokes
up.
aren't as funny as time around for that.
So, but the interesting thing is, though she vetoed this, there was one town in Westchester County, the town of Greenberg, that had the exact same legislation going forward. The exact same legislation that the New York State Assessors Association was pushing, but just for that town, to allow that town local option. And she signed that. So we are here. We've kind of piggybacked on the Greenberg's resolution. And we believe one of the reasons that it went forward is the home rule issue for municipalities. We've talked with Assemblyman Matt Simpson and Senator Dan Steck. They are totally for this. We've met with their legislative people, and actually along with John Stroud, the assessor. Sure, John, you took my shot. Supervisor for the town of Queensberry. We've put together a resolution that we hope that the county board would pass, as well as any town that wanted to could then piggyback on our resolution. Speaking with the legislative people, for our representatives, they're not sure if this is going to be able to get through this year, with the budget so late. And they only, are in session till the end of June. But if for some reason we can't get this passed for this year down there, maybe next year would be a better one. We're trying to get all our ducks in a row. The other interesting thing is we have the exact same legislation as last year going forward this year, but really nothing's been done down there because they've been concentrating on the budget. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I have a question. Do you have the bill numbers for this year's version?
We have our resolution, but I can get you those.
Okay,
The bill for this year.
thank you.
It's the
Supervisor
exact
McDevitt.
same wording.
Terry, thank you for bringing this to certainly my attention. Again, early this morning, I went through this and I was shocked. I mean, this is unfortunately is purely political. Okay.
My opinion as well.
At the end of the day, and in reading some of this information, I was shocked. And here we talked about a condo in Skinny Atlas sold for $2.2 million. It was assessed and taxed as if it were worth $464,000.
Well, that would probably be because of an equalization rate.
Mhm.
So maybe it would have been assessed around, if it sold for 2.2, who knows in this market, it might have been assessed for $1 million or 950,000 or something, probably not quite that low.
My message is obviously we all in our society have got to pull the wagon mutually. Okay. We can't have folks that can afford very expensive condominiums and have the guy that owns a modest home in anywhere in this state carrying more than their fair share of the load.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't work in the final analysis. So the big city developers and the folks that can afford them, all you're saying is let's all carry our weight equally. Let's not have the guy that owns a single family modest home carry that weight. So.
And make it local option. You don't, if a $5 million project was going to go into like Little Stony Creek or something, maybe they want that. And they're going to give them that. They're going to agree. Well, we won't assess you at market value because they want that there. But around the county, it's becoming more prevalent. We only have 2 condo projects in Queensberry. I just threw some quick numbers together. So because of the way we have to assess the 2 small ones that we have in Queensberry, the county is out about between $12,000 and $15,000 a year. And the school is out about $51,000 a year because of the way we have to assess just the 2 small ones here. Lake George and Bolton. Bolton has the Sagamore condos going for $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, $1 million. And they're just not paying their fair share. Unfortunately, this would not go backwards, although my mother would love it to go back to 1980 and make every condo project local option. And maybe they could pay some, refunds or something, but the legislators, our legislators didn't think that would anybody down there would go for going backwards and getting that back money.
Supervisor Gerasi.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to move this forward as presented.
I would ask for one minor amendment, which would be to add Assemblymember Carrie Warner, because she does represent Glens Falls, and I'm wondering if you've met with her.
We have we have had the Saratoga County assessors at our Warren County Assessors Association meeting last month. And they were contacting Carrie Warner to sign on with this as well, because Saratoga County assessors feel the exact same way.
She is one of our assembly members. Yep. Supervisor McGowan.
I'll second it.
Okay. Further discussion, and I'll open it up to non-committee members. Supervisor McGowan.
Sorry, and the assessors, thank you very much. And I'm not supposed to say that, but you can't make this shit up, all right? It is unbelievable. And the depth of how far sometimes our state legislator and people think, but this is just amazing. I'm wholeheartedly behind it to move it forward to the equalization for everyone. So thank you.
Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, thanks for for explaining what the impact would be, around here, but I'm wondering countywide, what's the potential impact on our countywide revenue for this? If everybody opts for this, how much more would we get?
It makes it local option. So
Yeah, I understand that, but if everybody picks it up, what are we looking at,
depending on, I don't know, Bolton Lake George have condos. I'm not and Queensbury. I'm not sure. Warrensburg might know. But they're coming. And if the western part of the state can value single family homes and under condo on ownership, it doesn't have to be like we think of condos, like townhouses. They can be condo ownership can be single family homes.
I'm going to go around the room, but
Good
County
call.
Attorney Elman.
Hi. Hello, Ms. Ross. Larry Ellman. I know we've spoken on the phone, but I'm not sure I had a chance to meet you.
Nice to meet you in person.
I had a chance to read and digest the resolution, which was very well written and put together. So thank you, because my office didn't have to prepare it. I just had one question. I wanted to clarify that this is really a call to action resolution for the legislature, meaning you're asking the Board of Supervisors to support the modification of a state statute through this resolution and informing our legislators, calling them to action to support that modification of the statute? Or is this a request, a more direct request to approve a home rule modification to
Yes.
state law similar to the town of Greenberg?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, while you could certainly pass a resolution that supports the statewide bill that we're still trying to push forward, this is more going home rule. We figure if Greenberg can do it, Warren County and the towns in Warren County, any way we can do it, we take it. But yes, this is a specific resolution for Warren County
Okay.
for home rule.
So with that said, I would, if this were to pass, I would just ask the committee to make it subject to some modifications by the county attorney, just to make it very clear that what we're looking to do is request under the home rule municipal law, the authority for municipalities in Warren County to take this step. If that's.
Yeah, yes, we have, and like I said, we have this resolution with our legislators. Their legislative people are going over it, so they may make some different recommendations as well.
Yep, and we'll coordinate with them as well.
Right.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Allen is informing me that we should amend the resolution to say that we will abide by the recommended changes from our county attorney with respect to the home rule language.
Then Carrie Warner.
Yeah. Good.
Approve as amended by the county.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay.
Great.
Chairman Garrity wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I know you said you couldn't go backwards, but if you have a revow, you could go through and change his property. No,
No.
never.
No.
No, we'd like to, but that will never fly. You know,
Only for anything going forward.
So only prospectively. Okay.
although my mother may want to speak and I can defer to her. Come on up.
I want to go over here to Supervisor Conover, then I'll come
Oh,
around.
no, I won't.
I'm Tian Rain, 39 years as an assessor, Bolton, Lake George, Lake Luzerne, and I was also supervisor with the town of Bolton for 6 years. So I know every side of this, and I was not referring to, as Terry suggested, going backwards 40 years and collecting that money. I am suggesting that if this provision goes forward, where new condominiums will be assessed at market value, that a community should also have under home rule the right to assess existing condominiums at market value. The provisions in this proposal and what Greenberg did only applied to newly built condominiums. So I would say I'm a proponent of two separate resolutions, one as it's written and one with the same verbiage to existing condominiums also at market value. And just my brief 40-year-old experience, we had a small resort in Bolton, little cottages looking on the lake, 13 units, each individual. They were going to sell them as condominiums. I was the assessor, had been for 1 year, and the county provided a tax map number for each of those 13 cottages. They were going to get their own tax bill. They were going to be able to finance them just like a house or another unit, but they were owned under condominium law. But we went to court. And unfortunately, I had not consulted with the town attorney prior to the court appearance. And we had a little conference in the room before we went to court. And he said, you are not going to win. Tax law will prevail, even though you want equity, you want everything assessed at market value. We cannot do it. The law says differently. And it never went to court. We negotiated a settlement. And 40 years later, I can't fix it.
Supervisor Conover.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just for my colleagues, this is not dissimilar to our, what we saw with the solar. The solar taxes allowed for jurisdictions to opt out. And that's what we did at the last county meeting, right? We opted out of providing those huge tax credits to that particular land use. And so the legislation from the state then and now is to allow for municipalities, counties and municipalities and school districts to opt out should they choose to opt out. And I think that's smart because I think that in terms of this subject, one size does not fit all regions of the state of New York or all municipalities. And it may be that you have a municipality that wants to do something particular. So there's precedent for this within the tax law, and the solar provisions are an excellent example of allowing communities within the tax law to opt out, which is what we just passed.
Right, but I do want to clarify that what the county attorney is saying is that this resolution is the way that he has clarified it, and what we just agreed to amend it to say is that we're asking for the home rule law for Warren County. Hold on, rather than simply advocating for passage of the statewide law, which we can do either one or both. But what he has said is that if we really want the home rule for Warren County, he's got to amend this language.
I didn't want to complicate this. I would do both. I would support statewide legislation.
Okay.
But I'd also move forward with a home rule message. In the event that it can't be done statewide, maybe they'll look with favor on a home rule message. So I'd actually do both,
Yeah.
not one or the other.
To me, this just isn't quite clear enough for the home rule thing. This is, to me, more the call of action language. Supervisor Stroud?
And if I could just add a comment as the supervisor from Queens, town supervisor is approaching. there would be two votes if we were going to do two separate actions. One being the call to action, which is really how I read this resolution, and a new additional resolution looking forward to and moving forward with home rule request
For Warren County specifically.
for Warren County, and possibly what I have to look at is particular towns in Warren County.
Okay, like this town they said mentioned Greenberg or whatever it is. Okay, sorry. Supervisor Straugh?
Yeah, well, the first resolved that I put in this resolution says that the municipalities of Warren County, like the town of Greenberg, wish to have the same ability to have the option, and I capitalized option to stress that, of assessing condominiums and cooperatives the same as single-family housing based on market value, which would provide more equity in taxation and fairness and assessment. So what we're trying to say is the county supports home rule here in that the county agrees that municipalities should have the option of assessing their condominiums at market value. And another purpose to this resolution is to give the townships a model, and I'll send it to you in Word format so that you can just put your town in there and see if your town boards support this, if your town boards do. And again, it's just the option to do that, and it would be up to each township. So we would like, and this will be brought up in legislative and rules too, we would like the towns to pass their own resolutions of support using this. Like I said, I'll send it to you in Word format so you can just put in your town's name in place of Warren County. And thank you.
Supervisor Wild?
Madam Chair, thank you. When I'm looking at this, it almost appears to be a revenue piece, a request from the county. And there's more to this, and maybe it's additional whereas that second homes places pressure on our local communities to provide housing for our workforce. So if we're giving incentives for condominiums, we should be giving incentives, in my mind, for our workforce housing. We have enough of second homes in a lot of our communities, all right? But we definitely need this demand for workforce housing. So I would like to find some way to incorporate that if we could. As instead of just a revenue grab, it's, you know, it has an impact upon us in our communities to be able to afford housing for our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to try to clean this up a little bit. Let's go back to adopting the resolution as it's written and presented here on paper. It's well written. It's a good call to action. We want to have the option for Warren County and all of our individual municipalities. Then, as our county attorney advised, we'll do a second resolution if that's what the committee wants to do about the home rule law for Warren County, which is a specific technical thing that we would have to seek, like we do with the mortgage recording tax. Yes?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
And I gently suggest that that second resolution maybe go forward next month.
Okay.
So I have a chance to just check some details. In preparing, I reviewed this as I saw it as a call to action, not as a request under the municipal home rule. So I'd like a little time just to put it together. So the committee is looking at an actual document on that second part.
Yeah, I think that
I'm comfortable.
would make
And my
sense.
apologies to the
And then
the
we won't
town of
have,
Queensberry for not understanding the intent behind that.
No, and actually, I just quick comment. The legislators, the legislative people that we met with did stress home rule. They wanted, you know, that, so that's very probably going to come back once they get a chance to concentrate on this after the budget's passed. And I'm sure that will be more of that home rule in the resolution that they want us to put forward.
Right, okay, and it probably has specific language that they will want, right? Okay, so I think it's best if we just pass, or if that's what the committee wants to do, we'll pass this, and then we won't have any conflicting language with the exact same resolution that's in front of the legislative committee as well. So without any further discussion, I'll call the question on the motion to approve the resolution as written. Yes, Amanda. Thank you. Is it acceptable to withdraw the amendments about the county attorney? Thank you.
Revert to the original resolution.
Yes. Thank you all for your patience with round and
I
round.
will second that.
Thank you, Brad. Any further discussion? Supervisor Smith, do you have your hand up or just thinking?
I've never been accused of thinking. But, no, I'm just, no, I'm good.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you all for being here and for your expertise on this issue and your advocacy.
Yeah, I'll twirl my pen.
And waiting. And how's that retirement going?
I miss it every day.
39 years.
All right, Lexi, does that take care of that item? It does. Okay, yes. Okay. Good. Okay. All right, let's go back up. I'll open it up. I was remiss in not doing this for public comment. Any other issues? Anybody? Okay. So item number 1, go ahead, Lexi.
Okay, so item number 1 is a resolution request to enter into a new contract with Constructive Copy for our bulk plotting of our county and town tax maps. This is a yearly thing we do. So I got a quote from them. I actually got a quote from 2 companies just to compare. They're the 2 that we kind of go back and forth with to see which was the best pricing. So
Can I have a motion to approve this? Supervisor McDevitt, second by Supervisor Gerasi. Any discussion? Yes.
Budgeted? Money budgeted?
yes. We, just so you all are aware, these maps are maps that, yes, we get for the county, but we also provide to the towns every year.
Supervisor McGowan.
Yeah, that was my question. It's just, like 1,583 and 729. I mean, it just seemed odd numbers, the bulk printing.
Oh, yeah, no, that's why. It's the request, because it's not just what we get, it's what the towns get. And that's how many they are. And we do it by size as they do the paper that way to add it up to get the cost. So the towns also get half-size maps. We do not here at the county. We just get the full size, but they have the option of half as well as full size.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. All right, down to referrals. Mr. Ellman. I believe this is you. And I think we have slides.
Yes, and I'm going to ask the committee's indulgence in shredding the handouts that we provided you. They're about 85 to 90% correct. Some of the issues and the details were a little difficult to wrap our arms around. So this is on the exemption, real property exemption for volunteer firefighters and EMS workers. And what I'd ask, I'm sorry?
We do not have the printed copies in our packets, so you don't have to.
No
worry
idea
about
what you're
shredding
talking
them.
about.
Good. Already shredded.
But I think Amanda is going to pull up the slides to put on the screen.
Well, when we do.
No, I'm going to ask not to pull up the slides
Pull up.
because, yeah, we're going to, I would like to present that next month for you. We do have some time. And the difficulty is it's a new statute. And it appears to lack specificity in some terms. And there's areas where there's conflicting interpretations already. So we basically more or less resolved those conflicts. But I'd like to be able to provide handouts to everybody as part of your monthly meeting packets. So we can go through that decision-making process. It's my understanding from the committee, there's a desire to move forward with a possible resolution. to provide this exemption. And with that being said, we'll basically have a presentation that'll give you the decision points that need to be made next month.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's fine. We're already behind schedule anyway, so this will help catch us up a tiny bit. Unless there's any discussion from the committee, we'll just put this over till next month.
And even making it simple, it will take a little time to work through it.
Okay. So we'll budget some more time for next committee meeting so that Larry can give us a full presentation. All right, anybody from the public or Lexi, anything else? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
McGowan and Giraffe.
We're gonna-